and dudettes and my non-binary friends. So this is my first video as the social activist educator. So I think I haven't really looked into it, but I think there may be a gap in YouTube for psychologist and social worker reaction channels. And this, I've been thinking about it for a while, and this one kind of sat with me a bit funny. I'm like, you've got Abby, who is bachelor college educated, and then you have obese without a higher education, and both their points are valid, and there's a lot of gaps I saw in knowledge that he couldn't understand from the what is she called it, from the sorry, my brain's a bit tired, the eating disorder specialist as well, because she was talking in very academic language. So I thought, look, I've got a couple of opinions and a little bit of knowledge I can share, and I can help maybe break down some of what the words mean. The interesting thing is they're using Anne Boleyn as a case study, but then I suppose in this case, I'm going to really break down the Anne Boleyn as a case study. So this is a bit of Inception, Abby reacting to Anne Boleyn, obese to beast reacting to Abby. So yeah, it's a bit of an Inception, but yeah, I don't know. First video, so let's give it a go. So the first thing I'm going to start with is a bit of context and background, and maybe some content warning. This is not a criticism of any of the people in this video. This is more, I suppose, it's just adding to the information and education, and breaking it down. So no one's opinion in this video at all is wrong in any way. All their opinions are valid, and they're all actually correct. There's no criticism coming from me. If I use particularly the words man and woman, it's in relation to gender theory. And gender theory just basically breaks down the inequalities between men and women, or people with male genitalia and people with female genitalia. Why is that relevant? Because they get into words like insulin resistance and hormonal conditions, which is the endocrine system, it's a complex system of hormones in your body, like testosterone and estrogen, progesterone, so all of that kind of stuff. 100%, I actually believe sexuality and gender are all on their own spectrums. So I'm not discounting trans, non-binary, all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying in this context, I'm talking about the hormonal biologics of the difference between men and women, and how that impacts on weight loss. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically people with a uterus and ovaries who produce estrogen predominant to testosterone, which a male produces, influences high levels of insulin sensitivity, which is the hormone that regulates your blood sugars, and your blood sugars have an impact on how quickly you put on weight, how hungry you feel, those kind of things. So that's the first breakdown of content warning. So again, I fully believe gender and sexuality are a spectrum, and everyone's experience is relevant. And in the context of where I am in the hierarchy of privilege. I'm a white, I think cisgendered, still questioning, but I think I'm going to say cisgendered white woman of white woman of, you know, English-speaking dominant society. And again, like, the hierarchy of privilege and the hierarchy of inequality is very relevant again in this video. So hierarchy meaning like triangle, like who's got the most privilege and inequality at the top. For example, probably cisgendered males of the boomer generation, generally speaking, and at the lower end you probably have trans, black females. Look, that's just an example. I haven't even broken down the triangle of inequality yet, so hopefully I will do that in another video. So another perspective that I'm coming from is the Australian context. So my knowledge of American culture is I'm quite aware and informed about American culture, but again, my experience is limited anecdotally, which means by my own opinion and experience, to Australia. So just keep that in mind. So my background knowledge is I'm a master qualified with a degree social worker. So that means I look at, like, I have the individual, like the single person knowledge of psychology, as in how you change certain things in the mind or put strategies in place. But I also have a second layer to that, which is my social work experience, which is the environment in which a person is surrounded by, which can explain why things can be so difficult and why it's not always an individual choice of what is happening in your brain, particularly in regards to mental health. I also come from a systemic, which again is the system in which you live in, which is political, environmental, you know, like inequality, all those kind of factors. And I'll always promote that my opinion is not always the correct one. And in your individual case, if you need expert advice, don't ask me, ask your doctor or specialist. I am not the expert in every area, particularly when it comes to nutrition. That I'll leave up to Abby. I do have a base knowledge about my own story, my own body, and how that all works. But Abby is she's a registered dietitian from an American society. All right. So the next thing I want to do, because I'm from Australia and because I live in Wurundjeri country, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, past, present, and upcoming. You know, sorry, I do want to recognise the traditional and Indigenous owners of the land. All right, so I'm going to be pausing and updating the video as I go. It might be a long video and I may not get any viewers, and that's fine. But yeah, so the thing is, I'm not breaking down like the weight loss and stuff like that. I'm going to look at the cultural and social factors of what contributes to probably Amber Lynn's context of obesity, how she got here, and again, I'm going to make a few assumptions about her possible diagnoses, just so I can put words to the case study. And Amber Lynn is the case study in this context. All right, so, all right, where am I up to? All right, let's start the video, and I'll yeah, I'll make comments as I go. All right.
Episodes, all of which have collectively helped her lose close to 90 pounds. Now, it's important to mention that for Amberlynn, these episodes are not just benign binges that can, easily be overcome and forgotten about at the next meal or snack. There can actually be a difference between a binge and what Amberlynn has been diagnosed with, which is binge eating disorder. So to dive more into these topics, I've once again invited my colleague, eating disorder dietitian Alessandra Maggiasano, to provide her insight and expertise on the subject.
I'm kind of curious to see what they have to say here.
Thank you again for
All right,
joining
I'm
me.
just going to pause it there and say she's an eating disorder dietitian. So she will be trained in base level knowledge about psychological interventions and how to use food and strategies around food that I'll get into it with later in the video on systemic and genetical factors and stuff, and hopefully educate more in the language that she's using.
Me, Alessandra.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be back.
So what is the difference between a binge and binge eating disorder?
Okay, so great question. The main difference between the two of them is essentially clinical criteria or diagnostic criteria. So a binge eating disorder is a mental health condition that can be technically diagnosed, and it follows very specific quantitative measurements. So things like eating a certain amount of food in a specific amount of time, generally larger than someone would eat comparably to you.
Well, I mean, it's like binge eating is more than just like overeating, like, oh crap, I went to dinner with my family and I freaking ate like 4 rolls. Crap, I didn't want to do that. Like, that's not binge eating, right? Like, there really is like certain things that go into it. I think one of the biggest things is, for me at least, is like the shame that you deal with. Like, if you just overeat and you're like with a bunch of friends, like, most likely you're not going to binge while you're eating out with a bunch of friends and family. Like, that shame isn't the same as like when you're at home alone. Like, I saw someone comment, like, I would hide in my closet and eat, right? That's a completely different feeling.
And
just to expand on what he said about shame, there is very relevant research to mental illness and shame. If you want more, I would suggest watching a few videos by Brené Brown. Oh my God, she's amazing. And she spent years studying shame. But there's also a really good point that I think the eating disorder dietitian says about validation, but she never really expands on it. Shame and validation go hand in hand, and in my personal opinion, validation is becoming so much more relevant as we're moving into the new generations. Because there's a lot of shame. Shame can be involved in the color of your skin, the way you eat, your weight, your height, things like what gender you are, those kind of things can make you feel shame. And when you feel shame, you kind of want to feel better, like you want to release the power of the shame, and that sometimes comes from external or internal validation. I'll explain that more as she gets to those kind of words.
Also involves some qualitative measurements like feeling guilty, feeling uncomfortably full.
Dang! Man!
Again, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to stop a lot. Qualitative, for people who are not aware, is a type of data. So there's a couple of levels of data. There's your experience and your friend's experience, often called anecdotes. So they're just one story from one person. Qualitative data is used in research, which is it can be thousands of participants' individual stories turned into one research study, or as little as 5. Qualitative data, looking at a single person's experience, is very good data, but it doesn't collect everything it often needs, and a lot of the time it goes along with quantitative data. Now, quantitative data is numbers, it's statistics, it's percentages, it's based in math and what like what we can look at in like more than like thousands more by a survey, rather than having to interview individual people, because it takes a lot longer. But the thing is, with quantitative data, it takes out the the context behind the numbers in the data, if that makes sense.
Hey, I haven't seen this video yet. Freaking dang, bro. Okay.
Eating when not hungry, things like that. But it's more quantitative in terms of recurrent episodes of binge eating, at least once a week, they say, in the past 3 months. Whereas a binge, first of all, could be on something other than food. Mm-hmm. And it's more subjective in nature. It can be more subjective. So someone can eat a cupcake and feel like it's a binge.
Okay, another big word to use there was subjective. Now, subjective means from an individual perspective. So subjective is, again, it can be called first party experience. So it's the experience of yourself, of what you've learnt, of what you've seen. So the opposite, so when she's talking about subjective, like if you've got a craving, say I might crave twisties, whereas someone else, one of my friends, might crave cupcakes. So that's an individual thing. Objective is from an outside perspective, someone that's not close to the subject, which is you. So it's like a third person data. All right, let's keep going.
Is completely valid. So that's the main difference between them. They're very similar, really almost identical. The only difference is one kind of is clinical and checks off boxes, and the other one can actually be more subjective and takes into consideration more qualitative components.
Amazing. Good to know. And regardless of diagnosis, what are some strategies to help kind of curb overeating and those binge cycles?
The main number one strategy for both is meal regulation.
Okay, so strategies, again, is a word used by psychologists, social workers, dietitians, experts in their field. Now, I get a bit frustrated with the word strategy, because strategy, again, if we use the word subjective, every single individual person, if you just say strategies, use a strategy, like what does that actually mean? Because the thing is with strategies, to be honest, there are thousands of strategies, and if you just put like one label, like one that people toss out all the time is like mindfulness. Again, later in the video we'll talk about mindfulness and what it actually means for each individual person. So strategies, again, for example, can be things like reading a book, listening to music, getting a massage. Again, there's thousands. So each individual person, there can be a strategy you'll find that works for you.
Whenever someone is experiencing either overeating cycles or binge eating cycles, it is because of some element of what we call chaotic eating, or eating that either doesn't satisfy enough.
Chaotic eating, man. I feel attacked right now, man. If anyone's seen my full day of eating, it's like, bro, I don't think I know anyone that is more chaotic, more of a chaotic eater than John. Oh man, I'm getting attacked right now.
Physically or emotionally or mentally. So we want to look at, it's widely known that binging comes from some element of restriction. That's thankfully now pretty well known. But
chaotic eating sounds like a death metal band.
I was going to stop it there, because Obesity said he feels like he's being personally attacked by the word chaotic. Now, again, if we look back, I don't know, let's just say back to the years of asylums and things like that. we used to use the words lunatics and things like that, and it seems like every generation our language changes and moves forward. Chaotic, I think there's a better word we could use. It's just, I mean, again, the word disordered, or I mean, it's not disordered because it's not a disorder, but like for chaotic eating, it's just like random eating, like there's no pattern to it, that kind of thing. That's what it kind of means. And yeah, certain words like chaotic can essentially sound very personal for a person that has experienced that in the past. So language is so powerful when you're trying to get your message across, which is why this Inception video is a little bit hard to break down, because again, you can see the different education levels intermingling and how that affects each person that's listening and their perception. I think that makes sense, hopefully.
Component of mental restriction that is less often understood, and that's what I like to focus on with my clients as well, is this idea that your meal regulation is not just about going through the motions of eating enough food quantitatively, but it's also about feeling satisfied and feeling like it's
I don't know, I have a kind of issue with using the word quantitative when you're actually talking about quantity. So quantitative kind of like, yes, it's, I don't know, I kind of see as the word relates data. She probably should have rephrased that and used the word quantity, because that's actually what she means, like the quantity, which means how much, like the amount of food you're eating. Yeah, again, different education levels doesn't mean anyone's wrong. It just means certain bigger words are harder to understand.
enough and that you're fueling yourself.
So this is kind of a more scholarly way of what I was saying earlier, is like, make sure you're eating a little bit more, right? If you're struggling with binging, a lot of it is related, like I said, to over restriction. So if you're over restricting, obviously that's a problem. So that's why I say, like, being able to eat a little bit more throughout the day, or, you know, being a little bit more structured and being like, I'm going to eat this many calories at this time, I'm going to have this meal at this time, and like making yourself do that, because then at the end of the night, you're not starving and you're like, I need to eat something, and then you're like, I'm just going to have this, and then it ends up being like a lot of things that you probably shouldn't have eaten, you know?
A lot of things you shouldn't have eaten. Now, restriction and overeating or binging, it's a really heated and complex issue, especially in relation to mental health and mental health disorders. So there is theory that says, and studies that say that the more you restrict foods and the less you try and force yourself to eat, the hungrier you feel. Why is that? Because if let's say you've got a cupcake sitting on your kitchen table, and you say, I'm not allowed to eat that cupcake, but you don't have a reason why. And, you know, the reason why is because you don't want to get fat. But the thing is, if you tell yourself, I can't have that cupcake, but there's no, like, internal, like, inside yourself, there's no reason why you can't have it, besides you don't want to weigh more than you do now. All you're going to think about is that cupcake. And then your mind is going to start wondering, making up excuses, you know, making reasons why it's okay to have the cupcake. Like, your mind wants that cupcake because you can't have it. Sorry. So yeah, like, that's the thing with restriction. The less you let yourself eat and the more rules you put around your food, the more you're likely to crave them. Now, again, this comes back to Abby's intuitive eating, and I think she gets into it a bit later, and I'll explain it a bit more about intuitive eating and why it works for some and why it doesn't work for others.
Often. And one of the biggest struggles that I see in my clients is they often ask me, okay, but I'm working on my overeating, but I feel like I'm eating more. You're telling me to eat too much. And
Yep. Oh, it's hard, man. It's hard when you're like, because you're so focused on like, no, I need to eat this many calories, like this is what works, and then someone's like, well, obviously you're eating, because if you're binging, right, and you're like, I need to eat 1,200 calories a day, like the arbitrary number that I just made up, but like I need to eat 1,200 calories a day, and you're forcing yourself to do that, but then 2 days out of the week you're binging on 5,000 to 10,000 calories. Your weekly calories are going to be higher than if you just let yourself eat 1,500 calories a day or even 1,600 calories a day and you weren't binging, right? Like that's why it can help you that's why like when you hear people like maybe you could eat more and still lose weight, like that's a big part of what that means, because you are eating more during the week, but you're not having those binge episodes, which are 5 to 10,000 calories or whatever arbitrary number you want to use. So therefore, you are technically eating more most days, and you are losing weight. Like it really can work.
I love the way he explained this. John has an amazing way of relating, this complex information back to his audience. And he's 100% right. Like, if you give yourself 1,200 calories and, like, you meet that at lunchtime, you're like, crap, now I'll just starve myself and binge the next day. But the thing is, calories, again, are subjective to every single individual. So, and the thing is, calories aren't, it's like you don't have this many calories every single day. It's not one day you're going to lose a kilo of weight because you eat this many. No, they're cumulative. So the more, like, it's a bit complex because, like, it's an accumulate, like one day you might eat less, one day you might eat more. So if we're talking averages, and averages means like a combination of all the days together, and what the middle ground is, you can lose weight a lot slower because you've allowed, like, they accumulate over the week. So at the end of the week, if you've eaten 1,000 calories this day, 2,000 calories, it all averages out to the end of the week. And this is the frustrating thing with weight loss, is when people want to lose weight, it's like a really dire feeling inside you. Like, I have to do this now. Like, I have to see results every day. And this is how eating disorders tend to perpetuate, because what happens is you don't see the results every single day, and the human body does not work like that. There are so many factors in regards to how much you weigh on every single day, and I mean, John has some great videos proving that. Like, I think his weight, subjectively, with his weight loss and his extra skin, bloat, water accumulation, like, he starts the day, so I think the highest I've seen it is 15 to 20 pounds lighter than the ends of the day. And for my Australian audience, pounds, so 15 to 20 pounds is like 7 to 10 kilos, because it's about divided by 2, but it is divided by 2.2, not 2. So, but that's kind of how my mind works. And the thing is with weight loss is it's not about instant gratification. It's not like you cannot get those results in a short time. It is a long game. If you want long-term weight loss, long-term improvement, long-term health results, you have to start today, and it's just a never-ending journey, which is why people use lifestyle now, which is just a new word for diet. But anyway, it's the long game. Like, you don't have to punish yourself constantly because you're not achieving the results you expect yourself to achieve. And again, I really support John with this, because he promotes the common sense diet, which is basically just keep swapping things. Like, if you're eating like a bag of chips and a chocolate bar, like, it may take you a month not eat that. But the thing is, if you make the conscious effort every day to maybe reduce that chocolate bar by 1 square, another square, and then start substituting it with something, lower calorie. I don't really believe in calories in a sense of losing weight, because if you do that much maths every day, you're going to go crazy. So yeah, you reduce that chocolate by 1 square, and then maybe you're like, I'm still missing out, I'm still hungry. Okay, and then this is where it comes back to Abby's experience with satiation, which is basically just the feeling of feeling full. So instead of having the chocolate bar, because you're having those calories, I can't think of a better example, but like an almond. Like, instead of 10 squares of chocolate, you have 10 almonds. Again, almonds, debatable because they're high in calories and fat. But the thing is, fat does satiate you longer, and I hate almonds, so I hate it as an example, but that's an example just to relate it back to that. But again, if you want real results in weight loss, you have to play the long game. So just keep that in mind.
The biggest struggle, because ultimately it feels like they're eating more when really we're taking away the binging and we're taking away maybe the grazing.
Man, I swear I haven't seen this video yet. Dang.
I hate that, taking away the grazing. If you look at like a toddler, they graze all day on low calorie snacks all day, so they can't keep a constant level of calories functioning in their little bodies, because their stomachs are small. They have to keep pumping it, and that is actually the same theory behind weight loss surgery. Because you have a sort of small stomach, you have to graze every couple of hours on small food, and again, that's a whole other issue entirely. But if you graze and keep reducing your hunger hormones and making your stomach smaller over a long period of time, you can't binge on those massive meals without feeling really physically sick.
Thing is, we're taking away the mindless eating that they weren't even aware they were doing, so they don't really count that. But when I'm like, okay, for lunch, have a sandwich and some veggies and hummus and a piece of fruit, they're like, that's a lot of food.
No, and that's what you just said there, right, is so important. Like, when you talk to someone that struggles with binge eating, because like, again, a big part of it, a big part of it is shame and guilt. So they're not gonna tell you that they're doing it. It's not gonna happen. They're not gonna tell you. So if you're trying to work with someone, and that's why it might actually work for some people when they are actually eating more, because they are still eating less, but they didn't tell you about these binges. But you can kind of, if like, hey, you're 400 pounds, like, and you're definitely not eating 1,200 calories a day. It's not happening. So that's why it's like, let's eat a little bit more. And so they are now not doing those binges. So in turn, they are eating more and losing weight, right? Like that's how that works.
100% agree. This is right on point. About like eating more food and things like that. But the interesting thing he said, I kind of missed it, but actually I'm just going to keep playing. The point I was trying to make is with clients with eating disorders and background mental health issues, honesty, for them to be honest with you, when you work with the client, for them to be honest with you, they're not going to be honest on the first appointment, the second appointment, the third. It might take a couple of months for them to truly admit how much they're eating, because their background and their history, like, their trust is so little. And I mean, the evidence, when you get to the point where you can see the eating disorder through obesity or rapid weight loss, you can it's proof that they don't trust people with the information, because you've said of shame and guilt, because they feel bad, because probably every time they've eaten in front of someone or someone said something about their eating, they feel ashamed, they feel guilty, and that reinforces that they need something to make them feel better, but they don't want to do it in front of other people, so they go hide and they eat a lot because the food makes them feel better.
But it feels like it is, because it's mindful, intentional. So that's really the main strategy when we want to curb, is meal regulation and satisfaction.
Amazing. Great tips. And in your opinion, why do a lot of weight loss diets fail individuals who suffer from binge eating disorder?
Well, I think weight loss diets
I'm going to say they're too restrictive. That's my guess.
fail everybody. And I think in one way they really are unfair to people who suffer from binge eating disorder and overeating, though, is because they're often, again, there's this stigma of that binge eating and overeating is about eating too much, a loss of control and no willpower. So weight loss diets offer this wonderful solution to just kind of fixing that, but it fails them ultimately because it's not about, it's about deprivation. Again, not just physically, but mental deprivation. But it pulls on their heartstrings of, you're not good enough. Like, you're just not doing it right. Like, if the diet didn't work, you eat too much. That's the problem. So it really is hard on them because they're disadvantaged in terms of the stigma of binge eating and overeating, for example.
Okay, stigma and obese people. That's a huge word. So stigma means that there's shame, like everyone around them thinks it's a bad thing and they're scared to tell people about it. And, stigma is reinforced every time they go out to eat, every time someone does something wrong. And it's funny because with social media, and we look at Instagram, the problem is, everyone sees the best snapshots of everyone's life and no one's real about it. So it promotes the stigma, it promotes that you're doing something wrong and there's something wrong with you personally, because you're obese and because you binge eat. So, the theory behind this is kind of like the achieving, like, especially when you're young and the younger you start shaming kids about food, the more food becomes a problem. Someone from the 90s generation, like, for example, like Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie, like, the skinnier you were, the more you were worth, the more you were prettier, the more you were attraction. Now, this is where it gets a little bit into gender theory because, it's taken a lot of years, but like, why do you need to be skinny? Why do you need to be attractive? As a straight cis woman, you're attracted to men, and men have promoted that the skinnier you were, the more attractive you were. Now, in this kind of era, generation, couple of years, like, big bums are the thing, like peaches are the thing, and we're reinforcing it. I'll get into positive and negative reinforcement soon. But we're promoting, we're encouraging that the more attractive that you are, the more worthy you are. And you can chase that perfection forever, but unless you peel back the layers and look at why this is, it's because you're seeking validation. So validation again is, I said I was going to talk about this. So validation is just acceptance. It's feeling good. It's feeling that you've done the right thing. So when you're searching for validation, I think society in general teaches you that everybody else needs to tell you you're valid. Everybody else needs to tell you that you're a good person, that you're perfect, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, when you really want to heal and get to the root of the mental illness, you have to kind of give strategies. Again, not strategies as in like mindfulness strategies, but strategies as in how to love yourself strategies. And this is where there's a huge crossover between the body positive and the fitness world, because like the body positive have got it so right with self-love, and validate, seeking internal, so inside yourself, and accepting yourself for yourself, and agreeing that you're worthy no matter what you look like. You do not need other people to tell you you're amazing, you're awesome, you're beautiful, because you know that internally. And anybody else that judges you, that problem is theirs. It's got nothing to do with you. And having internal validation and, you know, inside and loving yourself gives you the confidence to be more assertive in the way you approach other people, and the way you talk about yourself to other people. And again, John does an amazing job of combining positive self-love, things like that, along with being healthy. I mean, health at every size is debatable up to a certain point, I believe. But again, if you look at Amber Lynn in particular, her situation is, as a case study, she has a lot of trauma, and we know that because of the orphanage and being brought up without parents, drug addiction. She has a lot of internalized trauma. So trauma, meaning like bad experiences inside herself. And she's been brought up with that. So she's probably been taught a lot of that she's wrong all the time, that she's not worthy, that she's a horrible person. And she probably really, really actually hates herself. And you can see her often seeking external, so outside other people, validation. And this is obvious when you see her saying, like, why does it have me? Why don't people treat me nicely? Oh, someone loves me. That's amazing. Thanks to my beautiful, supportive viewers, things like that. But again, with Amber Lynn, she really, really hates herself. And for her, it is extremely dangerous for her to be on YouTube. Because the thing is, it's really complicated for her to be on YouTube trying to do her weight loss journey when she's got so much internalized hate. Like, she hates herself so much. You know, and like she did start the channel in order to be accountable. Accountable is a debatable topic altogether, because accountability, I mean, who are you accountable to? Yourself. Like, who judges you? Who rules you? Who's the boss of you? Yourself. So I think it lies more in validation than it does about accountability. And the thing is, you know, she's seeking a lot of external validation. And the problem she faces is that now she's done this weight loss journey for so long, and she just keeps putting on weight. She's getting no external validation, and she can't seek internal validation because everybody reinforces. So they encourage her to hate herself, and they call her trash, and they call her a piece of, you know, crap and all that kind of stuff. So she's criticizing herself, and she's got this layer of thousands of comments and dislikes of people reinforcing her belief that she's a piece of crap, which again is debatable by some of her actions, but again, some of her actions, you know, are probably a result of the internalized trauma. Okay, I'm going to watch a little bit more of the video, and then I'll get deeper into the positive and negative reinforcement as using Amber Lynn as a case study.
So insightful. And is there often a focus on
I don't know. I feel like I was like half right. I don't know. She was using a lot of words. So I got a little confused.
weight loss when treating people with binge eating disorders, or is this just like too triggering for the most part?
Definitely too triggering. It's very much counterindicated. So we would never focus on weight loss at all, at least at the beginning stage.
Okay, another couple of big words. Counterindicated. So this one's a bit tricky. Indicated on its own means it exists. It's a symptom. It's there. And again, indicated kind of means like the treatment. So counter-indicated means like if you're talking about two things that exist at once. So the binge eating and the hatred of oneself, and you want to treat the binge eating with a weight loss diet. It's not supportive because it's not appropriate, because it reinforces the hatred, and then there's something wrong with the client. And again, using the word trigger. Again, what does trigger mean? So unpacking trigger. So trigger means it's like it sends like a little light off in the brain that's like kind of it sends a signal, and it's received in often a negative or a bad way, and like it touches on something in someone's past that is often hurtful, that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll keep going.
Treatment. So just like how we would with someone who was suffering from anorexia or bulimia or any other type of eating disorder, weight loss cannot happen in recovery, in terms of that can't be the focus of the goal, because often, remember, it's the symptom, right? Like wanting weight loss is a part of the symptom. It doesn't mean it can't happen or can't be addressed, but it needs to happen within the process in order for it to work. Otherwise,
So I slightly disagree, and I think it's just the wording, but I do think that it is possible. I think what she is mainly saying is that focusing on weight loss while you're struggling with binge eating is probably not the best way to go about it, right? So again, like I was saying earlier, focusing on habits, and then through those habits, you will probably lose weight if you are having better habits. That's what it seems like she's saying, but again, like she's probably some a dietitian or someone that's more health at every size, so you can't, like, you're not allowed to say you can lose weight. It's kind of like taboo. So that's my opinion, at least.
Agree to a point. You can't promote weight loss while you're trying to get someone to stop thinking as food in black and white terms. But again, there is a theory behind this. So the theory is, let's start talking about positive and negative reinforcement. So it's not Maslow or Freud, I don't know. It's one of the psychological founders. Oh, God, don't get me started. So positive reinforcement. So reinforcement on its own means it encourages the behavior. And positive means it's a good encouraging thing of the behavior. Negative means it encourages the behavior, but in a negative way. So think of, like, I don't like using dogs compared to humans, but the thing is, if you want to teach your dog a trick and you use food as a motivator, so your dog does the right thing, you give it food, that's positive reinforcement. But if you're talking about negative reinforcement, if the dog does doesn't do the right thing, you hit it, so that's negative reinforcement. So they both achieve the behavior, but you 100% of the time are more likely to get a good result with positive reinforcement.
Triggering, and it gets in the way, because then it's just about, okay, but like the progress is about weight loss, which negates all the other indicators that we try and focus on when it comes to recovery.
And how could somebody theoretically with binge eating disorder who is at a higher weight, is it possible for them to safely lose weight without feeling restricted? And how would that happen?
It is possible. The number one
Abby's asking some good questions, man.
way it happens is time. It takes a long time, and you have to go through the process. So it's uncomfortable, but they have to go through the process of understanding where the binge eating came from to begin with. Because oftentimes what I find is when they start the process, it's like, okay, weight loss, that's what I don't feel comfortable in my body, I want to lose weight, and I hear them and I validate that. But once we go through the actual process of recovery and healing their relationship with food and therefore body, their idea of weight loss changes. So it's not necessarily that they completely give it up or that we don't touch it again, but we change together the definition of that. We might focus on, okay, well, what does weight loss mean for you? What does health mean for you? Is it about a size? Oftentimes those kinds of things are what they would say at the beginning. It's about a jean size, or it's about looking a certain way in clothes. When you go through the process, the definition changes to something a little bit more holistic, and that's how it can safely be done, because then their mindset is shifted to something much healthier.
So this is a good comment, and I'm glad that this was brought up. So this is from Jen. She said, John, I totally see your point, but just to be clear, she is talking about an eating disorder. Weight loss really shouldn't be the initial focus with any eating disorder, even if that happens naturally. And I would agree with that, and I think that's a great point. Obviously, that's what they're focusing on here. I think that just for me, my mindset is always just, I'm a person that lost weight. I try to help people lose weight, and so that's where I'm kind of thinking. But I agree with what you're saying, and I think that it's a great comment.
love that John acknowledged that weight loss is his field of expertise. Because in this video, they're particularly talking about a mental health condition, not a goal to be a smaller jean size. I suppose, they're very, very different things. But again, there is a crossover. Particularly, in the fitness community, it's all about losing weight, being healthy, blah, blah. Again, what does healthy mean for the individual person? So let's say for a person who's 100 kilos, which is about 220 pounds, health for them, look, they're not in the morbid obese category, depending on their height as well, because you take BMI as the baseline of being healthy, for this example in particular. So, 100 kilos, again, John's about, I think, 220, 230 by memory at the moment. You would see him as the picture of health, which is totally fine, but again, his height, his weight for a female is not healthy. And then we're talking about mental illness on the other side of the screen, and eating disorders and binge eating and things like that. Now, how do these cross over? Because mental illness causes obesity. Mental illness causes undereating, weight loss, that kind of thing. The thing is, someone without a mental illness can put a calorie restriction on themselves, achieve that calorie restriction, and achieve their ultimate goal. Whether they're happy with that is subjective to what the goal was and why they were doing it. You can take John, for example. Look, I can't say, because I haven't seen any videos of him talking about mental health, like depression and anxiety, and his weight loss 100% would not have been easy, but it may be easier for someone like him rather than someone like Amber Lynn, because he had the motivation, he used the accountability, and the funny thing was his channel started after he'd already lost the weight, so he wasn't held accountable at every single kilo he lost or every single pound he lost. So he came from an initial healthy place onto YouTube, and was a huge advocate of self-love because of the loose skin. Amber Lynn, on the other hand, started at, a higher than average weight, and she started it for weight loss. She had already lost 89 pounds by memory, don't quote me. But the thing is, she started her weight loss journey on YouTube. So every step of the way, she's been accountable to her viewers. She's accountable to herself only. But the thing is, the validation of the viewers has either encouraged her or discouraged her from weight loss. Now, Amber Lynn started, I think, 7 years ago. Fast forward to today. So you know, we've seen her get cancer recently, which is quite a scary thing, and it can be a life-changing event. And I'll be damned, she started losing weight. She dropped, I think, more weight than her initial beginning of her YouTube, which is fantastic. And I think she did get a lot of praise, but the thing is, a lot of the reaction channels stopped reacting altogether when she got cancer because out of respect, because I think they all, Alex and Michael and oh my god, his name is escaping me. But anyway, they all stopped reacting out of respect. The thing is, again, you know, Amber Lynn never got, people hounded her for years to get insurance in America. She never did. Until it was too late and she got cancer. Now we all know, I think the majority of people that follow both of these communities know that health insurance is extremely ridiculously high priced in America, and there's no kind of universal health care system that we have like in Australia. So she never got insurance, and having cancer, having surgery, having all those tests and imaging done would have been super expensive. Now, there's a couple of theories going around right now. Some theories say that, you know, she has a massive savings account and she's been accumulating it over the years. Some people say that she's in massive debt and her YouTube income just pays off the debt and she gets in more debt. That's up for debate. What's not up for debate is the fact that she would have gone into some degree of money decrease because of the cancer, because it would have been so expensive. So I think in this case, unfortunately, money has been a huge driver of Amber Lynn's YouTube and the good times and the bad times, because money has been a constant positive reinforcement for her to keep trolling and doing what she's doing. This is my theory, by the way, but I mean, there is a little bit of a lot of evidence to back up what I'm saying, because if you watch on her social blade, every time her views drop, because we know from YouTube you make the money from the views, not generally the subscribers. So every time her views drop is because she's doing well and she's getting boring. What does she do to get more views? She does something dramatic. She does something extra. She does something that pisses everybody off. So they go to her channel to comment, to tell her she's wrong, which again increases her exposure and her, her exposure and her, the action, the popularity of a channel that YouTube promotes. The more clicks you get, the more comments, the more, views she gets, the more money she gets. So if we take her cancer diagnosis and treatment for an example, all the reaction channels turned off. So she had no exposure, no driving factors, no flow from the reaction channels to her channel to give her a bucket load of negative comments. All her comments would have been supportive. Her dislike to like ratio, I don't know if she actually turned them off, but I know there was a massive change in her dislike to like ratio. And the thing is, a lot of people stopped watching her out of respect. But again, this was negative reinforcement because she was bleeding money. And because of the cancer diagnosis, she's gone, oh crap, I have no money to pay this massive amount of treatment. And there's two things happening here. She's sacrificing her health for monetary gain to possibly improve her health, or she's sacrificing her health for monetary gain. It just happens. And the thing is, it's really, I do have a little bit of empathy for her because, it's expensive to do cancer treatment, but the preventative cancer treatment would be to lose weight. But she's being positively reinforced for gaining weight and being dramatic. And I have had discussions with people in the forums about that, she's killing herself for views and things like that. But at the same time, people are paying her for the drama. And every time she does well, the views go down. And now all the reaction channels have, not all of them, but some of them have picked her back up. And again, her views have gone through the roof because she's being dramatic, so she's getting paid more. Again, I don't know if that was a very easy rant or explanation to follow, because there's a lot of cogs and working parts that are reinforcing her to do the wrong thing by herself. And the other thing that's happening is the comments are so negative, they're reinforcing her hatred for herself. They are proving to her that she is worthless, that she is a piece of trash. So she has done some pretty horrible stuff, but again, she's come from a really crap childhood, traumatic background. But again, she hasn't got to the point where she's realized she is in control of her future. There's a really good quote by Will Smith that said, "You are not responsible for what happened to you in the past, but you are in control of what happens in your future," or something along those lines. It is not your fault something happened to you, but it's your responsibility to do better. I think that's it. So she hasn't got to the point where she's learned it's not her fault that things have happened to her, but she needs to take responsibility for her future. That is almost impossible in her situation, because her sole income relies on the fact she gets views. And the better she gets, the more boring she gets, the less views she gets, the less money she gets. And the really poor thing about Amber Lynn is she's got a couple of really crappy things happening in her life right now. One, the cancer, obviously. Two, she's so disabled by her weight, she cannot work a regular 9 to 5. And the other factor encouraging that is that because a regular 9 to 5 does not pay as much as she's getting now. So she's disabled. She can't work. She can work, but she can't really work. And she gets paid more for doing what she's doing now. But the thing is, it's destroying her health. And the other really crappy thing is Becky. I really have theories about Becky, because from the evidence I've seen by the reaction channels having receipts, is that Becky is actually most likely addicted to some sort of cannabis, which does explain her presentation in the videos. And I believe, don't quote me, I think someone said she's a big gambler as well. So those two things in conjunction are bleeding money out of Amber Lynn's account. So I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Amber Lynn monetarily, and she's kind of stuck in a toxic system, in a toxic circle, and we can see that by her cycles. She has the motivation to be better, but she loses money, and she doesn't have the money to afford to be better, because it's a privilege when you get to that big to be able to reverse it. And again, with the binge eating disorder, it comes back to the fact that she hates herself so much, and everybody's telling her she's a piece of crap, that, it reinforces the behavior to continue. And there is a real frustration for her, because sometimes she lets out little things like, why does this keep happening to me? It's so unfair. I'm only 28 or 29. The thing is, she does have control over that to a point, but her environment is making it so difficult for her to improve her life. Now, that's a very complex theory, and it is, I guess you can put it down to a conspiracy theory, but from my knowledge and my experience, you kind of are a product of your environment, and you can only control what you can control. And you only can make things better if you work at it. Everything takes hard work. And the thing is with her is she always plays the short game of weight loss. She never plays for the long game. I mean, and again, everyone on YouTube has to stay relevant, because if you don't stay relevant, you lose views, you lose money. So if your sole income is from YouTube, you have to stay relevant. And the way you stay relevant is being often controversial, changing up what you do on your YouTube, being controversial. And we've seen this like with Abby and John. Like Abby has done some reactions to some pretty interesting YouTubers and some really intense YouTubers like Greg. Like the amount of criticism she got for that, but I bet you her views went up, and I bet you she got more money from it. Same with when she did the reaction to John. Like, we've seen a massive domino effect with her reaction to John, reacting to Greg reacting to Abby, a natural vegan reacting to Greg and Abby and John. I don't know. It's just a huge... and the funny thing is, I bet you they all got a big boost in their cash flow for those couple of months. So yeah, I mean, reactions are so in right now. Like, they are a huge driver in the YouTube market. I have no idea why. I guess I do, because I like to watch them too. So let's continue before this video gets ridiculously long.
So I appreciate you leaving that.
Than just a body size alone. So it can be done safely. It just has to be done over time and with the right unpacking along the way.
And so could somebody with binge eating disorder ever get to the place of being able to eat intuitively?
Absolutely. I see it all the time. It's one of the most amazing things that can happen from binge eating disorder that is like pretty chaotic in eating. You can go and eat really, really intuitively. It just, again, takes time and trust, because ultimately it's a relationship that's broken.
And so Rachel said, I agree, but how long before you discuss weight? I think with that, I mean, it's a good question. And I would say, obviously, I'm not an eating disorder specialist at all, but like, I think that's going to be person by person. And if you really are in treatment for an eating disorder, then that's probably something that you would talk to with your, the specialist that you're working with, not me.
He's 100% on point with that. You always talk to your specialist. I don't think you ever really need to talk about weight and weight shame and body shame with someone that has a history of such deep-rooted mental illness. I mean, you can watch... she's part of the Butterfly Foundation. I don't know, she's an eating disorder channel that tells her journey. I feel awful for not remembering her name. If I remember it, I'll link it. And the thing is, like with eating disorders, I don't think you can really bring up weight, because again, using the word trigger, it triggers something deep inside you from your childhood or something like that, of the trauma that's brought you to have a problem with food in the first place. So if you change the word from weight to health, which is awesome, it's like your goal is to get your mind healthy, and it'll lead to your body getting healthy, hopefully to a certain point that's in your control.
And we just have to heal it. And once your relationship with your body is healed and you practice, that's the other thing I tell my clients, you've got to practice. It's not perfect. You're going to have days where you don't eat intuitively because, you're busy at work and you need to eat and you're maybe not really hungry, but you have to. That's not really intuitive, but it kind of is, because you need it in the bigger scheme of things. So these are the ways that we talk about intuitive eating. We make it practical.
I appreciate that they brought this up, and like she's like making it clear that, hey, intuitive eating is not the solution for everyone. Okay, like not everyone can just go from oh, I mean, like this is one of my biggest things with health at every size is they go from, oh, this person is eating a ton of food and they're overweight. You just need to eat intuitively and everything will figure itself out. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Like someone has to get the knowledge and gain and understand their body to a point where maybe they can be intuitive. I'm not even sure if everyone can be intuitive. I think that it's the goal that a lot of people should, kind of strive for. But it's not realistic to just be like, everyone should be intuitive right now. Go for it. It's not that simple. It doesn't work that well.
And absolutely, anyone can eat intuitively.
And do you see success with implementing like mindfulness strategies for people who have binge eating disorder? And like, what would be the most effective?
Mm-hmm. Mindfulness is absolutely number one, very effective. And ultimately, it's effective because it forces the client to be aware of the present moment, which is usually the opposite of what's happening when they're overeating or they're binge eating. Even if they're aware, some clients will say like, I'm pretty aware I'm binge eating. Even so, there's a disconnection with your body. So mindfulness kind of brings that all to the surface. So it's things like unpacking, your triggers, environmental triggers, figuring out, do we have to reposition things in your kitchen? Do we have to reposition where you sit at the table? Screen time, bowls, portioning, all those kinds of things help to bring mindfulness to the surface, as well as tons of journaling. So
I know people hate on triggers, but like,
oh my God, before he starts talking, because I think by memory from previously watching, he's right on point. I do not disagree with mindfulness. I hate that people just people just throw it out there like everyone knows what it means. And people, again, get so triggered by the word mindfulness, particularly me, because it's like, have you tried mindfulness? It's like, yeah, but again, mindfulness is an overarching, so it's like, the top of the pyramid, and there's different conditions underneath that, and then different things under that, and then different things under that. There's so many different ways to do it. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being aware of your thoughts. And there's different theories that can get you there. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. Mindfulness is such a complex psychological tool. So what it really does, again, she did say it brings you into the present moment, and makes you think about what you're doing before you do it. But mindfulness is it's a muscle, and it takes years of work to get it to the point that you need it to heal from an eating disorder. So, I mean, she's talking about like bowls and table settings and stuff that I would call them strategies, rather they're environmental boundaries more than they are. So environmental boundaries kind of means like environmental rules you give to yourself to promote your mind to connect to that thing. And another thing you can do in terms of a boundary is have a set schedule. Like you do this at this time, this at this time. So your mind likes consistency, and your mind really likes repetition when it's trying to heal from a mental illness, because it knows what's going to happen. It's a safety tool. Again, mindfulness, I could do a whole video on that, because it's just such a complex system of working parts, and to just throw it out there like it's the tool to solve everything, anyway, this is why you need to go to a specialist to find the right mindfulness technique and strategies that work for you.
That stuff's important, and everyone has different ones, and so like it really is tough, like, because there can be, like she said, a bowl like that could be someone's trigger. Like it might sound ridiculous to you, but if that's something that you struggle with, like that really can be the thing. Like there are so many different things that can trigger someone to do something like this.
That helps. At the beginning, I'll have clients write a ton of notes around their meal times. I'm less concerned with their logging of the food and more about the context around it, because that's the mindfulness piece.
Big sigh. Okay. I think I missed just before when she said journaling again. Look, the good thing is, watching this video again, I hear her, and she is correct with the use of journaling in regards to eating disorders, because she is the expert in that, I feel, and she's not wrong at all with anything she's saying. It's just there's a lot of complexities that cannot be explained in such a short amount of time. But again, with journaling, I did miss this last time, but she said, I want to hear their meals, I want to hear when they're eating. But the thing is that's not relevant. It's the context behind what's happening to them at the time they choose to eat. I mean, again, triggers is it's just an easy word to use, but like if someone has a big binge, it's like, document everything that happened prior to that binge, because that binge may not have been a reaction to the 10 minutes prior to the binge. It may have been a build-up or accumulation of everything that happened that particular day, if that makes sense. So like if you've had a really shit day of like 10, 20, 30 different crap things, and you just go to the end of the day and you say, stuff it, I'm just going to eat as much as I can, because eating all that food gives you such a good feeling. It releases endorphins, and like the good feeling hormones, which again positively reinforces the behavior. In response to that later, if you have issues with food, it makes you feel guilty and shame, which is something that John said a bit earlier. So it's all a constant circle, and to break that cycle, again, journaling in this instance is a really good way to see what accumulated that day, of why it happened, and what tools and strategies can we put in place to prevent that happening again.
So it's very important and very effective.
Amazing. Okay, and finally, what are some strategies to help reduce that emotional eating component that may contribute to binge eating, of course, in addition to therapy?
Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned, journaling is very, very helpful. But again, it's this idea of just tuning into your body's cues. So I like to use introspective awareness a lot with my clients and asking them, can we listen to your heartbeat, your pulse, how do you know you have to go to the bathroom, your bladder being full? Do you ever question that? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, that's where I want you to get with food. Or you don't question it. Your body gives you a message and you just do it. So that's what we're working towards. And there's little strategies that I work with clients on to work towards that. Things like hunger scales, to figure out, where am I in terms of hunger before a meal, middle of the meal, after a meal?
I think that's a great way of explaining it, right? Like when you have to go to the bathroom and your bladder's full, you're not like, should I go to the bathroom or should I wait and pee my pants? I don't know. Right? Like, I think that like treating it like that, if you get to a point and if you feel like you're not there yet, that's something that you can work on, right? And I don't think like everyone that isn't there has some crazy disorder, but like there's a lot of people that like for them eating intuitively or making the right, it really is tough. It's hard.
Just to add to that, this is years of work. This doesn't happen in days, weeks, months. This is years of work to get to the point where you can tune into your body. It takes a long time. It takes building up that mindfulness muscle. So yeah. Compare
over time, and also things like grounding techniques I find very, very effective.
Grounding. I shouldn't have paused it there, but she's about to talk about grounding, but by memory she doesn't give a really good reason what grounding is and why we use it. So grounding is, I think grounding use, like originally, like the starting point for grounding came from disassociation due to trauma. So if disassociation means that your mind has like, it's kind of like, okay, the best way to explain it is like you're driving in the car and you drive for about an hour and you get to a certain point, at the, like, when you get close to your destination, like, holy crap, how did I get here? Like, I don't remember. When I used my indicator, I don't remember. Like, when I turned a certain corner, I just did it automatically. Your brain is on pilot mode, like autopilot mode. So the thing with grounding, so that's kind of like what disassociation is. And the thing with grounding is when you, like, especially like if you had a lot of trauma, like you'll walk around the house or you'll lie in bed and you'll get so lost in your thoughts that hours can pass and you can go, oh crap, where did the time go? So the thing is with grounding is it brings you, like, if you practice it, again, this is another muscle in your brain you have to teach and you have to practice and you have to build it up. So grounding is when you, like, you're kind of like lost in your thoughts. And this doesn't happen overnight either. This is another thing that takes years. You go, oh, like, you have to recognize that you've been lost in your thoughts, and grounding basically means getting your feet in the ground. Like, if your head's up in the clouds, your feet need, like, you need to bring yourself back onto the ground. Like, put your feet on, like put, you know, feel the ground under your feet. That's where the word grounding comes from. So to do grounding, everyone is different and every individual finds a different way. Like, she's talking about heartbeat, pulse, things like that. That's a very complex way. That's an advanced grounding technique. So some of the grounding techniques, again, it goes hand in hand with mindfulness, but some of the grounding techniques I use personally, sometimes when my mind wanders so far, I cannot feel my body parts anymore. And this happens a lot with people with chronic pain too. Like, you just have to turn your brain away from your body because it's so painful all the time. So to ground yourself, like, the way I do it is I have my tool called Gizmo. It's a tool. It's basically a massage pillow. So it's a pillow that has these really hard balls in it, and I'll put it like under my glute muscles and things like that. And it's so like, there's so much pressure associated with it. It really makes my mind really, really aware of my body. Like, I've got another person I know who has to go outside and put their feet in the grass and feel like the temperature of the grass or the wetness of the grass, or, like, you know, feeling dirt under your feet, that kind of thing. So it's just basically bringing your mind into the present moment so you can feel your body and you feel more in control, if that makes sense.
So similar to the mindfulness stream, I pull from DBT, dialectical behavior therapy modalities, where they talk about using ground.
Okay. DBT is one you're going to have to Google, because I do know what it is. I know it's such a complex theory. Again, like, mindfulness can be the overarching, like, the top of the pyramid. DBT is a theory and a counseling technique in order to, like, it's like cognitive behavioral therapy, just advanced, and it's often used for people with borderline personality disorder, or narcissistic disorder and things like that, because it teaches, like, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, that kind of thing. So emotional regulation, like trying to stop yourself, like, having panic attacks and things like that. So, and distress tolerance, especially because borderline personality disorder is rooted in trauma. So distress tolerance is when you get a trigger, and instead of like having a massive anxiety or panic attack and just losing control of your entire body and emotions, it brings you it brings your so your ability to deal with stresses, and it strengthens that ability. So it strengthens another muscle in your brain, which gives you the strategies when something, eventually. She does talk about exposure therapy in a minute. So, you expose yourself a little bit by little bit by little bit, and like your strength builds up, so you don't have to have a panic attack when you get a trigger. You can recognize, oh crap, I've been triggered. Let's ground myself so my brain, so I don't lose control of my brain. Again, it's a very complex system of ideas, and there's a lot of moving parts. But again, this is why it takes so long, so many years, and such intense therapy to try and address these disorders and mental illnesses.
And using your senses as a means to ground and calm anxiety. In DBT, they use it for anxiety. So sometimes I use it when we have urges for binging. So we might kind of together figure out, okay, well, which of the 5 senses do you identify strongest? And if someone says, you know what, I just touch is really important to me, we might think of something that they can use as a touch mechanism to have with them when they are experiencing an urge or when they're coping through something.
This is some really good information, man. I'm learning right now too.
Like fuzzy blankets, or like a squishy ball or a fidget spinner or things like that. And any of the senses can have these very powerful tactile grounding techniques and strategies. So we create kind of like an urge toolkit using these strategies. So that
this is really cool. I really love this, the sense theory. I actually, funnily enough, learned a really amazing one. Just by watching YouTube videos, everyone's like got different strategies for anxiety. The coolest one I learned was actually from Michael B. Petty. He said it's the 5 senses. So maybe like the one that you use, again, this isn't relevant to, like, it is relevant to people with disabilities, but they may not have every sense. That, like, probably the sense you use that, like, most dominantly is your eyes. So what's 5 things you can see? The next one is 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And that connects you right back to every sense of your body, so you can feel all your senses working together. And the thing is, it doesn't just take one time to do this. Like, for me, my anxiety, I can calm it down by doing that once, whereas some people have to do it 10 times in a row and do like, like, I don't know, if 5 by 10, 50, like they might end up seeing 50 things, which is fine. Like, just repeating it over, or seeing the same things, or feeling the same things, or tasting the same things. It is an amazing tool for grounding too.
When people go into situations that are very stressful around food, or even when they're at home dealing with a mealtime, you can go towards this to curb the emotion, because whenever we got emotion, we just got to ground and get present.
And so what about those clients who say, I know I'm hungry, I know I'm full, but what do I do about the times where I'm hungry for the wrong foods?
Mm-hmm. Great question.
Wrong foods. There are no wrong foods. There are no right foods. There are no bad foods. There are no good foods. It's not black and white like that. There's certain, like, you should never, like, personally, I don't think you should ever eliminate anything from your diet. I mean, like veganism, things like that, it's a choice to not eat meat because your values don't meet your actions. But in terms of like bad and good foods, like, if you put labels on that, if you put labels like those on them, it's like, if you're eating bad food, it encourages and reinforces the idea that you're a bad person because you've eaten a bad food. No. That's the thing, like, you have to take away food rules completely and throw them in the bin, because you go for like the bad foods, highly palatable foods, because they release more feel-good feelings, hormones, and again, that's a positive reinforcement. But again, I love that John always promotes the common sense diet, because it stops people it stops people thinking in black and white terms around food, like everything in moderation. And again, we're playing the long game, not the short game.
So my answer to that would be, let's figure out why you think they're wrong foods, right? Because that goes back to the mental restriction then. So even though you might say like, okay, I just want the bad foods, the reason you want them is because you think that they're bad. There's a lot of emotional energy that gets charged when we have to think that something is bad. So, I get this question all the time. They're like,
now this is a really big topic with a lot of like health at every size, and this is why like when people ask me, what's your favorite cheat meal? Or like, what's your favorite like naughty meal or whatever? And I'm just like, dude, I don't think about it like that. Like I know I can eat whatever I want, and I will eat whatever I want. But for me, the reason I choose to eat the foods that I choose to eat is not because I'm trying to be good and I need to avoid the bad foods or anything like that, right? It's because like I know that this is the food that I want to eat that will fuel my body the way that I want it to be fueled. Like there's so much more to food than if it's good or bad, right? And I think that this is really important that a lot of people miss this. Like when people, like I honestly almost cringe. Like I'm not going to joke. Like I kind of cringe when people are like, what's your favorite cheat meal? I'm like, dude, I'll eat whatever I want, bro. Like I don't think about food as a cheat meal. Like I just eat, right? And if I want to have a piece of cake, I'll have a piece of cake. More often than not, I don't want a piece of cake. Because I don't like how it makes me feel. There's not much nutrition in it. It was, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's more than just that.
Like
100% said perfectly.
Foods, aren't there foods that people just shouldn't eat? Like, how can you be a dietitian and tell me that, like, there aren't foods, right? I'm sure you hear it too.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you.
Yeah, don't eat, like, I don't know, freaking toxic sludge or something. It's probably not a good idea.
Aren't there foods that we just shouldn't eat? And I say, like, of course there is gentle nutrition, of course there's foods you should have more often, etc. But the energy that you spend trying to villainize those foods takes away from your decision in that moment to make another choice. So you don't have to choose that food, but you don't have to hate it. I mean, let's just neutralize it. So if you know when you're hungry, know when you're full, but you just want the bad foods, it's because you're thinking about bad foods. It has too much power. And potentially you're not getting enough food also during the day, right?
Now, I think that it's important that this is a good mindset to eventually have, but I think in my opinion, this is something that is very hard to actually implement. If you are at the beginning, I know that they're talking, this is mainly about like eating disorder stuff. So of course, like I'm going to relate it more to weight loss. Like I want people to understand that if you're not there yet, like it's okay to not be there yet. And I think that's very normal. But I think that that's where eventually you should try and get to, right? And it might seem like it's very far off. And trust me, it definitely felt very far off for me when I was first losing weight. But it is very possible to get to that point. It just takes some time and it takes some effort.
Right? Like if you're craving somewhere, usually the first thing we look at with cravings is you're not eating enough. But when you are, and there's the physical component satisfied, then we look emotional. And we say, well, then you're probably thinking that it's bad and that's why you want it. So let's do some exposure therapy.
Right. It's kind of the difference between physical restriction and emotional scarcity, that same kind of mentality.
Yes. And it's a fine line between a restriction and a boundary.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what recovery is about, is learning what is a boundary and what is a restriction, and knowing that one is flexible and one is inflexible. And that's the difference.
Love that. Flexible and inflexible. That is so helpful. Thank you again so much, Alessandra, for providing so much helpful insights. And once again, everyone, I'm going to be leaving all of our contact information in the description below so that you can reach out if you're looking for some one-on-one support. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again to Alessandra for providing her helpful insights.
That was a really good conversation. I hope that people stick around and watch that part for sure.
So once again,
so that's the end of the bit I wanted to comment on and give context to, just for the general population, because I think education should be free and should be available widely, and everyone should be able to understand the depths of the topics they're interested in. Because education is actually quite boring, because you just get someone talking at you all the time. It takes engagement and fun in your brain to be able to connect these topics. And the concept of do your own research is just Google the crap out of it. Like, just keep going, make it fun, make it educational, go on a deep dive once in a while. It's great fun. So I think I'm going to end it there. Like, I want to thank all 3 people that were involved in this reaction, and it's good to, hopefully someone learned something, and hopefully the video gets out. So thanks everyone for watching. Have a good night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thanks. Bye.